Hello everyone, it's Gareth from Recycle and I'm going to do a quick demonstration today on changing a wheel. Often assumed by people in the bike industry that everyone knows how to do it, but if it's your first bike, you haven't cycled for a long time, you may have forgotten, or there may be a new type of axle. So we're just going to go through a couple of different options, make sure you can take the wheel on and off the bike, and then I'm going to go into repairing and burst in a tube as well. So here we've got a mountain bike with a standard quick release axle on the front and the rear. And I'm going to first of all demonstrate how to get the front wheel out, because that's the easiest. Now, with the bike on the ground like this, it's a bit of a faff. So ideally, you want to get the bike off the ground so you can work on it. And pretty much all the time, that's going to be the case, whatever you're doing on your bike. If you can, and you've got a stand, brilliant. If you don't, and you're out on a ride, a tree branch will suffice, and the first step would be to just hook the saddle over the branch just to take the weight off the bike so it's balancing there. Now, because I've got a stand, I'm going to use it, so I'm actually going to put the bike in the stand properly. So the front wheel, this one's got disc brakes. So there's a rotor here, there's no brakes to worry about up here. So all I need to do is get this axle, which is a thin skewer going through the middle, loose enough to be able to drop the wheel down. There is a quick release lever on this side, and I'm going to push that away from the bike to release it. It might be quite tough, but don't worry, it's firm enough to take the push. Push it away, and then on both sides, twist when you can. Now, quite often, you'll twist this so far that all the bits will fall off. That's not a disaster. That can still be rectified. There we are. Twist them enough so that the wheel drops out of the forks. Now, if you do undo it all the way, all that happens is this end nut comes off. And if it all comes apart completely, you're left with skewer, a spring with a big side facing to the outside, and then on the other side of the wheel you'd have the other spring, again with the big side facing out, and the nut that goes on the end. Put that back on. Now, when the wheel's out of the forks, when you've got disc brakes, it means there's nothing in between the brake pads. And if you accidentally knock the brake lever, it'll squeeze the pads together and they're really hard to separate again. So we've got a spacer with little teeth on the end, which will clamp onto the bolt at the top and hold it in place. In between the brake pads and push it till it clicks. It's locked in place. So now the bike's ready to stick in the back of the car or work on if you're fixing a puncture, whatever it might be. Assuming we've now fixed the puncture, let's put the wheel back in. So we remove the spacer, line the disc up so it fits in between the pads, and put the wheel in and tighten up. Now with these quick release skewers, there's a chance that the wheel might go in a little bit wonky. So to finally put it in place and make sure it's dead center, you need to take the bike back out of the stand, put it on the floor, which I'll do now. So as you can see, the wheel's quite loose in there at the moment because I haven't tightened it up. And depending on how I tighten it up, it could be a slight angle, which is why we put it on the floor so we can make it perfectly square. And then we're going to finish tightening. Now, I've tightened the turning one on the other side, and if I try and close this now, it's way too tight. So I just need to loosen it off a bit. And I'm looking at closing this so it's firm enough to leave a white mark on my palm when I close it. There we are. Final check, spin the wheel, make sure there's no rubbing on the brakes. You're good to go. It's very similar on the back wheel, but with the gears, it makes it slightly different, and there's a couple of things you can do to make life a lot easier. Firstly, change the gears down so that the chain's on the smallest sprocket available. Once we've done that, if your derailleur has a clutch function on it, like this one does, the clutch stops the chain from being able to move too much. Now I want it to move so I can get it out of the way, so I need to turn the clutch off, which allows me to move the rear derailleur. And all I'm going to do is, once I've loosened off the axle, is move this out of the way. With thumb on the back, fingers on the front, move this out of the way so that the wheel can drop down without banging into the derailleur. So I'm going to open up the quick release lever, the wheel's starting to drop, hold the wheel up, move the rear derailleur out of the way, drop the wheel straight down. And then you can see on the wheel, apart from the cassette, the actual quick release and axle parts are exactly the same. If you get confused between the two, this one on the rear wheel is a lot longer than it is on the front. When we're putting this back in, remember to move the derailleur out of the way. Remember to get the smallest sprocket onto this top bit of chain, so get it in between this loop here and attach onto that one there. So, there we go. And then line the brakes up and we're in. To line it up properly at the end, drop it down onto the floor to make sure everything's going to run true. Done. Now, some bikes don't have a quick release skewer. In fact, most of them don't come with it now. In these cases, they have a through axle. Some of the through axles come with a lever, but most of them are just a flat surface, and you'll need an Allen key to get them off. It makes life easier because there's no having to worry about the wheel going in at a slight angle. It's always going to be true, but it does mean you need the right tool to get the wheel off. Works in exactly the same principle though. Works in exactly the same principle. The Allen key goes into the socket, undo, hold the wheel in place, just keep on undoing, remove the axle, and then drop the wheel down. The axle itself is completely smooth where it's going through the wheel, and it has thread which locks into the other side of the fork. If you ever have a problem with your axle, this thread pitch is really variable. There's a number of different ones. There's a different lengths of these, different lengths of that. So it's important to know exactly which axle you've got if you ever lose it, so you can get the right one to replace it. So put it back in the bike, line up the disc, axle all the way through, and then turn it into place. And they will say on them how tight it needs to be. So this should go up to 10 Newton meters. So it's advisable to have a torque wrench, which you can set to 10 Newton meters, so you know you're getting it right. I hope that was helpful. Thanks for watching. If you've got any questions, please leave them in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe and like the video, and I look forward to sharing some footage with you soon.